Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate the intro and really appreciate all the attendance today. We're looking forward to showcasing this new functionality from D365 CRM. So getting started. So I'm Eric Gervais. I'm the sales manager here in the CRM business unit at Cargus. And when they released this new functionality for Dynamics late last year, it was one of those things where it was really exciting because not often do you get new functionality that is really so useful to make your life more efficient and build process. So we're really excited to show you some things here today. What we're going to start with is just really talk to you a little bit about what is sequences, what can it do, what's it good at, who and how do you use sequences, some best practices around building out sequences and how your team can interact. We also ran into some technical tips, so some gotchas as we were building sequences. So we'll have some of that for you. And then, of course, we're going to get to actually show you the product today. So we're going to walk through, show you how to build a sequence, show you how to attach it to different leads and opportunities so that you can actually build process automation. So let's get started. So at its most basic level, Sequences is a sales automation tool for your CRM system. So what that allows you to do is optimize sales cadence for your team. Each step in the sequence generates basically a task or a work, as Dynamics calls it, a work item that will allow you to either manually or in an automated fashion do a step on a timed sequence. So it does a lot of different things, which I'll show you, but the great things it does, sorry, trying to get a slide here. The great things it does is it standardizes your process. So if there's a goal, you have a whole bunch of sales team members that you want to follow the same process every single time a certain thing happens. I often talk about inbound leads. You want your sales team to take the same steps. This is a great tool to help build process standardization. It also gives a little bit more power to the salesperson to automate and touch more customers in a shorter amount of time without so much effort. So there's a number of steps within the process that you can automate. And most times you're mixing manual outreach with automated outreach. And then the other thing it does is it gives you access to not just that multi-touch component, which I was describing in the previous, but also multi-channel. So not only are you reaching out via email, via phone, on LinkedIn, there's a bunch of different ways, SMS text, there's a bunch of different ways that you can reach out to the prospect within the sequence of steps. So when we started using this, probably one of the first things that our own consulting team said was, well, why wouldn't they just use marketing automation? Why is this different? What does this mean? And it was actually one of the first things that we dug into as a team to really think about, okay, we've got this sales automation component, we've got this marketing automation component. What's different? What's the same? Why would you use one versus the other? So one of the things is if you don't have marketing automation at all, this is a fantastic add-on to your existing CRM system, and you don't have to have a marketing automation platform to use it. So the most basic answer to that, why marketing automation versus sales automation, is if you don't have a marketing automation platform, this gives you some ability within your own CRM system to deliver automated messaging to your customers. That said, it's more limited than marketing automation. It doesn't have all the social listening components. It doesn't have all of the event marketing, campaign management kind of stuff that a marketing automation platform would have. So it doesn't pretend to be marketing automation, but it does give you some taste of some of the same functionality that marketing automation might give you. Some things to know about when you're actually delivering emails through the tool. So it actually uses your own domain. So it will be emailing directly out of your Outlook. So what that means to you is you'll actually see the sent items in your sent items in your Outlook. What it means to the customer who's receiving your message is it truly feels like an email that's coming from you as the salesperson. So in that way, it's a one-to-one communication, as you see there at the end. It's a communication that feels authentic and direct from the salesperson, as opposed to kind of like a broadcast email message that would be coming from a marketing automation platform that might have this highly stylized template, and you may or may not get as high of a response rate on something like that. But in that case, you're trying to hit, a lot more people. This is kind of like a smaller audience kind of tool.
Right. Just something to add there is deliverability. So in marketing automation, when you try to send out, we know that it necessarily won't deliver to everybody because of, spam filters and all that, but one-to-one, you're almost guaranteed for that email through sales automation to get there. So that's a big bonus with sequences.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that color. So who uses this? So a lot of times this is going to be, sales and administrative staff that are helping the sales team. So you might have sales support, could be marketing using it, but largely it is, as an end user, it's the sales team and account team who are trying to reach either your existing customers or new customers to try and engage them in conversations and processes. It is a bit more technical to set up. So when you're thinking about security roles, who can use it, when you're thinking about what kind of functionality you want to automate, those are things that are probably better suited for power users, more technical people, maybe managers within the team, marketing and IT, just because it's a little bit more technical to do the setup part of it, not the actual delivery of sequences to the customers. And then who creates the templates? This is just kind of more of a recommendation, not a necessity, but you could actually have marketing create the content for these messages. Think about, because really what you're doing is you're standardizing a process for your sales team to follow every time. So the content could be created by your marketing team, or at least in collaboration with your sales team, to make sure you get the content right, so that when they're reaching out to people, it's on message and it's been kind of vetted by people who think it makes sense. So just a recommendation, doesn't necessarily have to be. So as part of the best practices and the role of marketing, they would be involved in creating brand consistency and coordinate how the templates are used with, in conjunction with other automated communication. So if you also have marketing automation going, you want to actually reach out to your marketing team and make sure you're not crossing wires with them about automated messaging that's being sent out already. So overall, the sequences can enhance the overall customer experience by sending that personal message that Brian was talking about from a sales user instead of a more broad message from a marketing automation platform. Best practices for admitting. The people who would be in charge of admitting it should be somebody that works closely with marketing and sales, understands the processes that are happening within the team, understands where there's inefficiency, where automation could really drive more efficiency and more touch points. And it's also largely somebody who understands automation and is comfortable building workflows. We often get into a situation where customers are building things that are kind of circular patterns. You want to make sure that you're delivering automation that makes sense. And then another part of the best practices is don't try and swallow the ocean, in effect. Keep it simple. Maybe pick one process that is highly touch oriented. So we think about inbound leads. Some other people think about kind of renewal processes or onboarding processes. The thing that sequences can really help you with is processes that happen over and over again within your team. And then you use that as an opportunity to actually find efficiency in those processes. And then as you iterate, as you get better at it, as you see results from it, then you can expand to other areas as you get more comfortable with the technology. So just a little bit of maintenance notes here. So when you're actually utilizing these sequences, you can get a lot of them. So one thing is making sure that you have kind of like a centralized admin that will manage the fact that you don't have kind of dueling sequences within your processes, that you don't have multiple sequences doing similar things, and that you don't have 100 sequences to manage. And then also the content can get stale. So your business changes, the messaging should change over time. So this is something that you should get into a regular cadence of reviewing the sequences and the templates and the content within them, so that the messaging doesn't get stale over time, or in fact get to a point where you're not actually delivering accurate content. So this is not just a set it and forget it, though it does make things more efficient. So just something to think about for administration. Here's where we get into a couple of the things that we learned just through trial and error and through reading documentation with Dynamics. Sequences is available to D365 Sales Enterprise and above. There is one piece of functionality, A/B testing, that is only available in D365 Sales Premium, but largely all you need to have to access this is D365 Sales Enterprise or higher. So all those three that are listed there, it is available in. Some notes about roles, security roles. So the people who can create need to be system admins, system customizers, or sequence managers. So those are security roles that Dynamics gives to you through the native Dynamics. And then the roles that you need to run sequences, so actually initiate new leads into a sequence, new opportunities into a sequence, are salesperson, sales manager, and VP of sales. Also default roles given to you by Dynamics. If you're like us and you've built custom security roles, there is a technical process of actually adding the functionality to that role, so that those users can also run sequences. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but just know if you're running into a situation where you've created sequences and the end users can initiate sequences, it's likely that there's just a little bit of background technical stuff that you have to add that to that security role so that they can actually deliver the sequences. And then finally, the entities that it's available for is leads, accounts, opportunities, and contacts. So all four native entities to CRM, to Dynamics CRM, are available. Custom entities you can't use this for yet. Not sure if there's something coming, but these are the four that you're available for right now. So some of the things, technically that we ran into, so I already alluded to one of them in the security roles. In setting them up, we found that you have to really pay attention to security roles and make sure that they're enabled. But you also have to turn on sales insights, adaptive sequences, timeout flow to make sure this works. You need to turn on email engagement if you want the added functionality of email engagement and conditions for emails. And then you also have to subscribe if you want to use SMS messaging to a service like Twilio to actually be the delivery of those SMS messages. So it will allow you to set up that step in the sequence, but you won't be able to deliver it unless you connect a Twilio account or something similar. And finally, if you want to do the automation wrapped around LinkedIn, you also have to have a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account. So just some of the things as we thought through it, we ran into a couple gotcha moments. And then this is the last slide before we jump into actually seeing some of these sequences in action. But the key is that these sequences can run manually, they can run automatically, and you can also have kind of like the option to do both. So what that really means is you can make this as manual a process if you're uncomfortable with the idea of delivering automated steps to customers, and you just want a standardized process, you can do that. If you want to go all the way to completely automated, you can do that, and everything in between. So without further ado, this is kind of like the meat of it. Actually show you the live software. So what you're thinking about is how to build a sequence and capabilities. So I'm going to show you how to build the simple steps inside of a sequence. I'm going to show you how to build conditional steps, which is kind of if-then kind of functionality, some commands, so kind of jumping to other sequences directly from a first sequence. And then, okay, great, you've built a sequence. How do I add these to audiences in a more automated way? And how do I manually add a lead to a sequence when I just want to one-off send somebody down a certain process path? Great, so let's get started. All right, so the first thing to know, so this is our Dynamics 365 instance here, our environment. So you'll see Sales Accelerator is one of the options here down the toolbar. So you initiate administration of sequences directly from the Sales Accelerator. I'm already kind of like in that section, so I'm in the Sequences tab inside of the Sales Accelerator. And I went in, and one of the great things you can do with sequences is, you thought it was a good example. You can actually set it up for different things. You could do inbound leads, and in this case, I chose webinar follow-up just because, hey, we're in a webinar, why not? So open up this webinar follow-up sequence, and you'll see it takes you to this designer screen. So this designer screen is kind of the basis for where you set up the steps of this sequence. So as I was saying earlier, you're building kind of steps in a process, and there's all different channels and all different types of tasks that you can create. You just go here, and it's really easy. It's just plug and play. You click on that plus button to add a step. You decide, hey, I want the first step. You signed up for a webinar. I want to send a thank you message back to you for signing up for that webinar. So this step's going to be called thank you step. And since I chose the email template, it's going to give me the option to add an email template that I've pre-created for this. And I just go over here and say webinar follow-up, thank the user. And then you see it's actually got basic append information in there. So it's actually pulling in lead first name, it's pulling in the title of the webinar, link to the recording and slides, full name, and thank you right in there. And that's actually going to be customized to the individual receiving that email. So I'm going to apply that template. Now it's attached. So now the first step in my sequence has been created, and that's just a simple thank you message. And it's going to go out, as soon as I initiate it or in an automated way. And then the next thing I want to do is I don't want to inundate you guys who have attended the webinar with a call right away. So I'm actually going to wait a couple days first. And I'm going to say, you know what? I'm not going to hit them the first day. I'm going to wait 3 days. So I'm going to put a wait step in here. And then after that wait step, I'm going to call you guys. I'm going to make a phone call. And what this is going to be is the first webinar follow-up call. And what this is going to do is it's going to assign me a task to make a follow-up phone call 3 days after that thank you email goes out. So again, versatility in ways that you reach out. And you know what? When I make that first phone call, I also want to get connected to this person on LinkedIn at that step. So that same day that I call you, I also want to link with you on LinkedIn. So I'm going to add a step there to get connected on LinkedIn. So that's going to give me a task, or you can automate a process to go out to LinkedIn and do that. So again, this is kind of the multi-channel, multi-step kind of process that you can create through this technology. Now, I'm not going to create steps for every step of this process, but just to give you some idea of some of the things available. You also have the ability to send a text message here. This is where, again, you have to have Twilio set up in the background to actually send SMS messages. You can send an automated email. So you have two choices here. I selected send an email, and what that did was create a task for me to send that email, and then it'll notify me in my task list to send that email, and it attached a template of that email, and I could make little changes to that email when I send that out in a manual way. Or if I wanted to do something different and I didn't want to touch that email at all, I could pick the send an automated email selection, and that'll just use that template and send it right out at the wait when it has delivered that wait time that you've asked for it to do, and it'll just automate that process completely. So that's, the more manual send an email is, I'm a little uncomfortable with automating all this stuff. I want to be in control. And the automated is, I really don't want to touch this, and I want it to be able to just do it when it does it. Same goes for SMS messages. You can do that same process in an automated or a manual way. And then you also saw me create a make a phone call step there as well. So those are kind of the big things. So now I've reached a point here where you've kind of seen all the different types of steps that you can do. Well, I want to do something a little bit more complicated. I actually want to send one person down one path because of some condition, and I want to send somebody down another path because of a different condition. So I've reached the point in this sequence where I want to create a condition. So in this case, I'm going to say field value, and I'm going to pick, I want to send them down a path, and this may not be a great reason, but are they an enterprise customer or are they not an enterprise customer? So this is kind of like a step in it where it's choosing, what path do I want to send them down? Do I want to send them down the enterprise route, or do I want to send them down a more standard route? So essentially you say enterprise equals yes, and advance to yes path if enterprise equals yes. So if on that lead record, it's identified as an enterprise customer, now it's going to send them down the second path here. And you can start a whole nother sequence of events down that path because they're an enterprise customer. I want to treat them differently than just kind of standard customer. And then the no path would be kind of like your more standard path, right? So that's conditional functionality. You can do that with all kinds of kind of to your heart's content of ways that you might want to manage conditions in here, but that's a really simple one. We have a field that is yes or no in the system, and we're sending them down a yes or no path within the system. So that's one way to create some sort of kind of diversity in your sequence. And then finally, you can actually do a command step. So in this case, I'll show it to you. A command step is a little bit different. You can use it to update fields. So you could actually send people back. You could actually, if they went down a certain path, you could actually update a field in the system that actually updates your data in the system. That's one way. I'm going to show you a different thing. The other great thing about the commands is you can actually send them to another sequence. So now, instead of building out within this individual sequence, I could build a separate sequence for enterprise customers directly and just send them down that path. So I can choose any sequence here to send them down directly from this path, from this command box. So essentially, kind of going back to the start, so you have email, phone calls, you have social through LinkedIn, you have SMS messaging, you have all these different diversity of ways to follow up with people. You have the wait timers to set that process. You have the conditions to be able to say, if they are this, then I want to treat them this way. And if they're this, I want to treat them this way within the sequence. And then finally, if you reach a certain point where they've identified themselves in a way that hey, this is somebody who's high intent and they want to buy, I want to send them down this process, you can actually jump them into another sequence directly from a single sequence. Pretty cool functionality available through this. And as you can see, not terribly technical. It's really just drag and drop, pick a couple things, build a sequence. As you get into the conditional and the commands, that's where like kind of a power user might be more useful. Somebody who's kind of a little bit more technically savvy might want to build something like that. But kind of the standard outreach kind of sequences, pretty much any user could build that kind of thing. So it just becomes kind of like a governance thing on your side of what you want to do with those sequences, who you want to be able to build them, and who you want to be able to deliver them. So that's building a sequence. So now we've got our sequence, right? So, okay, great. We've got this series of steps that we want to send somebody down. What now? What do we do with that, right? So you can actually build segments here. And segments are really basically like lists of individuals based on some criteria that you want to send them down a path. So in this case, I've already pre-created segments, so you don't have to watch me do all of this. I called it CRM webinar leads. And when I jump into this, this is where you start to set the criteria for this sequence. I want to attach this segment of our audience to it. So in this case, so this is the more automated fashion that I described. In this case, I want to say add a row, and I want to select a field. So what I want to do is, in this case, this is a CRM webinar lead. So what I want is lead source here. I want to know all lead source. So I want to, the audience I'm trying to deliver this sequence to is anybody who their lead source equals, and in this case, I want webinar, right? I can build a bunch of different steps. I could select a specific webinar if that's a field within the database that you have. I could further drill down the criteria, but just for the purpose of this, I'm just gonna keep it pretty simple and just say lead source equals webinar and save this. So now this segment's gonna only deliver this sequence to people who that follow that criteria. So it's going to automatically, you have assignment rules, it's going to automatically add any of these, any of the people that live in this segment of your audience directly to this sequence. So anytime that anybody meets that criteria, that their lead source is webinar, it's going to initiate that sequence, and those steps just start going. If there's a manual step in there, 3 days from now, it's going to assign a call to me, and it's going to show up in my task list to complete. Once I've completed, it'll move on to the next step in the prescribed way. So that's the more automated way to add users to a sequence. And then, of course, you're going to run into situations where it's like, hey, this isn't based on a specific criteria at all. I just want to make this easier. So I just want to, like, this individual called me. It doesn't really relate to any of the criteria we've built for automation, but actually I want to make my life easier in follow-up. So I'm going to assign them to a sequence. So that really just happens directly at the entity level. So I'm looking at this lead and didn't apply to any of the criteria that I had set to automate it, but I want to add this person to the sequence. All I have to do is hit this connect sequence. Now it's going to ask me what sequence I want to connect it to. And then I will go through, select that sequence, connect. I'm not actually going to do it because I'll actually start this off, but you select the sequence that you want, you hit connect, and then away you go. Then that person is now added to the sequence within the system. And then the final thing I wanted to show you here is you have the ability then to go into this workspace. Hold on, sorry. I'm forgetting where it lives. I apologize, guys. So this will show you where all the active sequences that are already running are, any inactive sequences. This is kind of like the sequences management area, and then finally all the sequences that I've created here within the tool. So that's everything I wanted to show you about sequences today. Hope that's exciting. We think it's awesome. And I'll pass it back to Brian, I think, here for a question and answer. Or is that right?
Just muting Eric there and putting myself on. Yeah, so at this point, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them through the questions pane there. and we'll get them answered. If we don't get to any of the questions, we'll definitely follow up by email. So if this ends, feel free to email us or put any questions out there. The first question we had was, will it be recorded? I think I put that out there. We are recording it. In fact, after the webinar, typically it automatically sends the recording out to you right after this. Are we able to see how the sequence would look from a sales rep perspective?
I don't actually have that configured. I don't have a front end of the sequence other than.
Gotcha. Other than what you set up there.
Yeah.
So in the one that Eric set up, it would be looking like a text-based email, right? That was the one that you set up there. So you would see it just like you would an Outlook email. Now, I think there's the capability of HTML, right?
Yes.
To do that. So yeah, you would see that. Is there an area where you can preview it within the software?
I know there was for the SMS text. I'm not sure if you.
Gotcha. We can follow up too on that one afterwards. Any other questions? While we're waiting, I had one for Eric myself as a marketing user. Do you have to have like LinkedIn Sales Navigator to use the LinkedIn functionality? Here, I'll mute myself here and put your back on.
Yeah, so for certain parts of it. So of course you can connect to any user just like you could if you didn't have. So I could just go out to LinkedIn and connect to somebody directly. But if you want to do in-mailing capabilities, especially in an automated way, so if you actually wanted to initiate an email directly through LinkedIn, through the in-mail functionality, then you would need some level of Sales Navigator license so that you could actually deliver those in-mails to people. So it's not wholly dependent on having a Sales Navigator subscription, though there are certain pieces of the functionality that would need to be initiated by that subscription. But of course, simple connections, anybody can do that on LinkedIn. You don't need a subscription to do that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that you can get that functionality. Let's see here. We have, will sequences run for users with sales team license? Is enterprise only to create or for them to run as well? That makes sense. Is enterprise only to create the sequence, I guess is the question. Here, let me give you some time.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing that correctly, we're asking about team members subscriptions, which are kind of the lighter users on D365 sales. So my understanding is it's creating these sequences for individuals. So it's the sales users who's initiating it. So you can't initiate it on somebody else's behalf unless you actually automate a process, but it's going to be assigned to a user. So if that user that it's assigned to is a team member, then I don't think it would work. It's my understanding of it. Yeah, and we're getting feedback from the team to the similar effect that that team members cannot run sequences. So essentially, you would have to have sales enterprise or higher to actually have these sequences run on behalf of an individual in your sales team.
Cool, thank you. We've got a couple more here. Is there reporting around sequence to see results, or how many times a sequence is ran?
Yeah, and that there is, and that's what I was trying to take you to, but I was struggling to remember where that was. I apologize. There's absolutely reporting, and we can kind of send some follow-up information about it, but it'll talk about how many people were initiated into the sequence, for sequence results. Yeah, so there's definitely some reporting. I apologize, I didn't have it prepared in the demo, but there is reporting around basics around how people, and I can try and hunt for that real quick to share it with you guys as we're getting more questions in.
All right, while we're looking for that one, we have one here with Microsoft combining marketing and insights. Do you see this replacing customer journey? That's a tough one. Here,
Yeah. So this is coming from my E+ friends, isn't it? I actually don't know the answer to that. That's a predictive answer. I don't know where they're headed. But definitely with some of the recent announcements, there's definitely some convergence and even some changes in the marketing application that are happening right now as we speak that are kind of making some of this functionality overlap. I think we actually talked about this with kind of the E+ team when this first released, and it's kind of reading tea leaves. It's starting to feel that way, but I don't know the full answer from Microsoft on that.
all right, let's see here. So we have one here. Will the sales rep be able to see the different steps of the sequence as it's running? My guess is that would be in the reporting aspect, but I'll let you field this one here.
Yeah, so they will be able to see the steps of the sequence as they're running, and they'll be able to see it in the reporting. And then you'll also have like certain things that, like Brian was saying, that you'll also see show up in other places. So you'll have tasks show up for yourself, and you'll also see, you'll also be able to exit. I didn't show it, but there are ways to then exit an individual from a sequence. So when they reach a certain part of the sequence and they've raised their hand and you don't need to automate this process anymore, you can actually exit them from the sequences as well.
That's a great one. Pausing or exiting a nurture is huge. If you connect with someone and your automation keeps going, kind of looks foolish. So you definitely want to have the ability to stop or pause automation when you take it on manual. So that's a good one. We may have answered this one, and this well, maybe we have one more here, but what are the roles salespeople need to use sequences?
Yeah, bring it. Sharing the right screen. Yep. So back to the roles. So the default roles that salespeople need to run sequences are salesperson, sales manager, and VP of sales. Those are the default. They come with D365 security roles that you need to use. However, if you've built custom security roles, there is also a way to, that's not something that we could really get into in this meeting, but you can actually attach this functionality to custom roles as well. But that was a gotcha that we ran into ourselves, is we didn't realize that at first. So we built a bunch of sequences, and since we here at Cargus built custom roles, security roles, we actually couldn't figure out why it wasn't working at first. That was a gotcha for us when we were first doing this. That there is a way within the security role to add the capability to use sequences.
Okay, next question here. Will there be any feedback if client opened email or clicked a link? My guess again is that would be reporting.
Yeah, I thought too. Yeah, so that's a place where you could also do conditional steps as well. So there was some functionality within the sequences that you could actually build conditional steps based on response. And one of our consultants is reminding me you have to have an email engagement feature turned on before that ability to kind of be responsive to interaction with emails and things like that. You actually have to have email engagement on, but if you do, then there are some things that you can do. And if this happens, do this thing as steps to the process based on response.
All right, last question here. At least I thought it was until we got another one. Is the functionality available in other Dynamics products?
As far as I know, this is only available for D365 sales for the licenses that are being offered here. So it's Sales Enterprise, Sales Premium, and Relationship Sales. So no, as far as I'm aware, it's not available on other Dynamics products.
All right, one more here, and then we can kind of, if there's other questions, keep putting them in. We can follow up afterwards. The last question here is, will this eventually replace customer journey?
Yeah, I think that's reading tea leaves again. I kind of very similar to the previous question that was asked. I think that's to be determined at this point. I don't think we know the answer to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eric, and great presentation. It was great even for me being on the marketing team to learn some more about how we can utilize this functionality. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today in our webinar. Again, you'll be receiving the recording shortly after this. You'll also be receiving a short survey after the webinar with a couple of short questions. We appreciate if you fill that out. But just wanted to say thank you and have a great rest of the day.